These stories in today's video are meant to be true. It is up to you if you choose to believe them. Thank you for choosing this video to watch. I very much appreciate it. I was on an assignment for the Army, making my way up from San Antonio, Texas, to Tacoma, Washington. It was a long drive, and they gave me 6 days to report to my new unit, but I didn't mind. I love road trips. There's nothing like the freedom of exploring the world by yourself. The first day of my journey, I planned to get as much driving in as possible so I could spend a few days in Utah, a sort of mini vacation, you could say. This was January, and the days were short, so maximizing the amount of daylight I had was crucial. I got up extra early that morning, carried the last of my bags out to my Corolla, signed out of my old unit, and hit the road at roughly 5 a.m. It was an amazing day. I saw the landscape transform around me as I headed farther west than I had ever been in my life. From the San Antonio metropolitan area, to the savannas of the Edwards Plateau, to the pancake flat farmland of the Great Plains region, America's breadbasket. Finally, the farms opened up into prairie and I saw the "Welcome to New Mexico, the land of enchantment" sign. Now I was really in the middle of nowhere. Continuing on US Route 380, I eventually found myself in Roswell. I could have gotten a few more hours of driving in and made it to Albuquerque, but I figured since I was in no rush, I might as well see what Roswell had to offer. Who knows if I would get a chance to visit again. As a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious, as Mr. Ballin would say, I took a self-guided tour of the shops and attractions. The next day, I continued to Albuquerque, then westward on Interstate 40. By the time I reached Gallup and started northbound on US Route 491, I still had 2 hours of driving left before crossing the border into Colorado, and another 45 minutes before I would get to Cortez, my planned stop for the night. However, my daylight was already running out, as sunset was at 6 p.m. I got Starbucks and refreshed myself for the final stretch. It was supposed to be easy. Just a straight shot. But looking back on it now, I figured that, had I decided to stop in Albuquerque instead of Roswell the night previous, I would have already been in Colorado by now, and possibly be making my way into Utah. I would have saved myself from what was waiting for me on that desolate highway. Route 491 stretched far into the Navajo Nation. On either side of me were endless expanses of prairie bookended by dark indigo mountains on the horizon. To my left, the sky glowed a faint orange-purple, the light slowly dying down like smoldering embers in a fire, until finally plunging the land into darkness. Every now and then, I would see the forlorn headlights of another car passing by, which gave me a bit of relief that I wasn't alone. I also had my road trip playlist on to keep me company, and call me ironic, but Hotel California was playing. After passing the small, lonely town of Newcomb, the next piece of civilization would be Shiprock. However, between the two was a 36-mile stretch of absolute nothingness. An abyss I had to cross. I was not ready for what I was about to witness. After several miles, and having not seen another car on the road, I saw something strange emerge from the horizon. Barely lit by the moonlight, I thought it was a road sign at first. Then as I came closer, I realized it was a person, walking on the shoulder of the road, heading in my direction. I squinted, trying my hardest to focus on the figure. In the darkness, I could tell they were wearing a poncho of some sort, with long, black hair flowing down past their chest. Who could be walking out here, all alone, at night? I thought. Whoever it was, they had no lights, no reflectors, no strobes of any kind to signal to passing cars that they were there. And they walked on the pavement, dangerously close to oncoming traffic. I pulled to the left a bit, giving them a wide berth. Suddenly, my stereo cut out, as if I had turned it off. The screen went completely dark, and my phone disconnected from Bluetooth. While this was unusual, it certainly did happen from time to time, so I thought nothing of it. As I approached, I saw the person raise their right arm, as if to flag me down and hitch a ride. Oh no 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 no, I thought. There's no way that's happening, buddy. As my headlights swept by, I realized it was a man, dressed in a button-up shirt, a wool poncho, jeans, and cowboy boots. His large belt buckle glinted as the lights passed him. But in that split second, I realized with abject shock that not only were his eyes painfully wide open, but they seemed to be tracking me. Somehow, he was able to see me through the glare of my headlights and look me dead in the eyes, not breaking contact until I passed. I was shaken for a bit, but my nerves gradually subsided. My stereo abruptly turned back on and my music continued playing. I brushed everything off as simply my imagination. The darkness and the shadows playing tricks on my mind. Besides, the man was behind me. I figured he must have been drunk. Indian reservations sadly had high rates of alcoholism. I looked in my rearview mirror. He was gone. I couldn't see him. Maybe he's too far behind me? No, that couldn't be. It must be too dark. Maybe. I drove on, trying to figuring out what had just happened, but at the same time, forcing myself not to think about it. Just when I thought I had moved on, I saw another shape in the distance. Getting closer, I realized it was another figure. Another person walking alone at night? There's no way. They walked along the shoulder of the road, swaying back and forth. Slowly, I could make out that this person was also wearing a poncho. Then I saw what looked like long, black hair, reaching down past the chest. No. There's no way. It was the man. The same man. But how? The man raised his arm again, trying to flag me down. What did this guy want? I kept up my pace, with no intention of stopping for any reason. Just like last time, my stereo turned off again. Suddenly, the man leapt out onto the road, arms waving frantically. I swerved into the left lane, narrowly avoiding him. In my headlights, I noticed he had the same wide-eyed look, his gaze locked onto mine. I also saw that his clothes did not look as they did the first encounter. Once they were clean, if not well worn, but now they were soiled and tattered, rags barely hanging onto his withered frame. His hair was wild and unkempt, with clods of dried dirt stuck in the locks. But his eyes remained the same. My heart nearly burst through my chest at the sudden shock. Hyperventilating, I slowed down and glanced into the rearview mirror to make sure he was all right. Nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to see. The man was running. He was sprinting towards me. I centered the wheel and accelerated, hoping to get as much distance from him as possible. But as I continued to speed up, so did he. Faster and faster I drove, but every time I looked in the mirror, I would still see him right behind me, perfectly keeping pace, his body tinted red by my taillights. I could feel my temples throbbing and my hands getting slick with sweat on the steering wheel. I was sick to my stomach. There's no way. I looked forward, hoping to see a faint glimmer of light from the town ahead. But I was still too far away. I looked back at the rearview mirror. The man was gone. I should have been relieved, but I knew better. Where did he go? I looked around, hoping to regain a visual on him. I couldn't see anything. Taking a deep breath, I refocused on the road, but kept my guard up. Just keep driving, I told myself. Only a few more miles to go. Out of the corner of my right eye, I saw something. Another shape. It wasn't the man, at least, I didn't think so. I glanced over, bracing myself for whatever was going to meet my sight. It looked like an animal. Some kind of animal, though I couldn't make out exactly what it was. Under the moonlight, I could see it running alongside my car, its forelimbs reaching out in long strides, its back undulating like a dog. Closer and closer it came. The closer it was, the more of it I could see. Little by little. Then I noticed, its limbs were far too long for its body. Its body was too short. It had no tail. The head was oddly round. And from it, came a trail of long, black hair. I slammed my foot on the gas, pushing my car's engine harder than it had ever been pushed before. By now I was clocking well over 110 miles per hour. But this creature, it kept up. It wasn't phased. It simply ran faster and faster to match my speed. Just what was this thing? How could anyone or anything run this fast? The entity seemed to have endless stamina. Just how long could it keep this up? Just how much faster could it go? Soon, my car would hit its top speed. And then what? How long could it maintain that before breaking down? It wouldn't be long until my engine overheats. But regardless, I would eventually run out of gas. And when I do, what would happen if that thing got me? At 120 miles per hour, my car had reached its limit. This was the fastest I could go. But the creature continued its pursuit. My temperature gauge was approaching the red, and so was my tachometer. I couldn't keep this up any longer. Suddenly, like the beacon of a lighthouse on a tumultuous sea, the first light of Shiprock came into view. It was close. So close. If I could just go a little longer, I could make it into town. To safety. I pressed on. I fixed my eyes on the lights, growing brighter on the horizon. They bloomed outwards, glimmering in the night air. Though it was a small town, it was a sight for sore eyes in my situation. Looking in my periphery, I saw the undulation of the creature's spine as it kept pace with my car. But now, it was slipping away, steering farther and farther from the road. It suddenly hit me just how hard my heart was beating. Beads of sweat dripped down my face. I looked over. The creature was gone. But this time, the feeling of dread had also gone with it. My stereo once again turned back on, and as my music resumed, I breathed a deep sigh of relief. I let off the accelerator. The creature, whatever it was finally gone for good. Having white-knuckled the steering wheel the whole time without realizing it, my hands were extremely sore. But I was glad to have made through. A week later, I told another soldier in my unit about what I had experienced. Being originally from Albuquerque, she was familiar with the Native American legends of the Southwest. The conversation steered toward a certain creature that she would not dare speak the name of. She also told me that the highway I took was well known for all sorts of paranormal phenomena. Google what Route 491 used to be called, and everything will make sense. Be careful out there. I just went into the murder-suicide house on my street. Nothing had been touched since the bodies were removed nearly a year ago. Not even the mattress where the bodies sat decomposing for 6 weeks. Most of the neighbors on our street are friendly. We look out for each other, we text, chat and say hello when we see one another, etc. It's a sweet feeling of community. In the past, there had only been one household that wasn't interested in being friendly with any of us. An elderly woman, mid-70s, we'll call her Maud, and her son, mid-50s, we'll call him Don. My partner and I, attempt to wave and say hello, only to be met with cold stares. Once my dog managed to slip out of his collar and run through their yard while Maud was out getting the mail. The glare I received from her while trying to catch the dog left me with a feeling hard to shake. You know that unexpected gut punch feeling when you become the object of a stranger's misery and hatred? Anyways, we learned quickly to stay out of her way. We barely ever saw Dawn. The blinds were always closed tight, they rarely left the house, and no one ever visited. I last saw either of them at the beginning of August in 2021. Dawn was getting the mail while wearing blue latex gloves. I thought it was weird. In early October, one of our other neighbors reached out to ask if we had seen Maud or Dawn recently. We had not. Suddenly we were all too aware that their grass that was over 3 feet tall in the mailbox was so full that it couldn't close anymore and papers were spilling out into the street. Obviously a welfare check was called. The neighbor who had put herself in charge of directly communicating with the police called shortly after the check and told us to sit down. Maud and Dawn were both dead and had been dead for 6 to 8 weeks. It appeared to be a murder-suicide, the assumption being that he killed her. I paced the rest of the day in front of my living room windows, watching the crime scene van pull up, the officers in and out of the front door, taking breaks to somberly chat in the front yard. And then after a few hours, out came the body bags. The smell was something I had never experienced before and will never forget. The following weeks I thought of how many times I had walked by that house with my son and dog while 2 bodies had sat rotting. I stayed up for hours a few nights trying to find out anything I could. Nothing. No news stories, crime reports, nothing. So I dug into Maud's history. All I could find was that she had been buried in a field north of town dedicated to the unclaimed. I kept a close watch on the house and researched the legal proceedings it would go through since there was no kin. Looking at that house had always felt cold and sad before, but now it felt dark too. Haunted. I became obsessed with Maud's story with no way of getting answers. Her house just staring back at me blankly every single day. Back in the spring, my young son and I were out catching fireflies. We would stand still, waiting for one to blink, and run in that direction. It took us up and down the street multiple times. I know this is such a small silly detail, but that night I stared into Maud's yard for minutes at a time waiting to see a firefly, and I swear not a single firefly blinked over there. I became so bothered by it that I stared longer, sure that if I just stared long enough I would see one, but nothing. Complete stillness and darkness. I told my husband that I hope someone would buy the property and knock the house down. No one had any business living there now. Today, around a year after they died, the doors were opened and people I hadn't seen before were in and out, carrying bag after bag of what looked like junk. I texted a neighbor and asked for intel. He said the house and all of its belongings had been collectively sold and bought at an auction 2 weeks ago. These were the new owners, probably getting ready to flip the house. I typically don't shove myself into situations, but I had just spent way too much time thinking about Maud, wondering who she was, why she was so angry, imagining what strange life her and her son had been living, and what their last moments were like. I knew I'd regret it forever if I didn't ask them what it was like inside. So I did. And they invited me in. One step into the front door and more puzzle pieces fell into place. This was a hoarder home. There was barely anywhere to put my feet. Stacks on stacks of old fine china, pots and pans, vintage books and records, knick-knacks, and countless boxes filled with God knows what from the floor to the ceiling. The woman who had led me inside said, "The mattress where it happened is still here. Do you want to see it?" Slightly afraid that she'd think I was completely demented, but far more curious, I said that of course I wanted to see it. She led me to a bedroom through piles and leaning stacks of junk. She walked into a cramped small bedroom with a twin-sized bed, and pulled the blanket back. If you've seen what decomposition stains look like, then you can imagine what I saw. After processing, I asked, "So this is where Maud was found?" "I think they were both in here. I'm trying to piece it all together. I haven't even started in the other corner bedroom, but I'm hoping it'll give me some answers. I'll be here organizing and sorting over the next few days. You're welcome to join me, if you'd like." I told her that I would love nothing more. So after all of these months, I am excited to have a chance to get some answers to everything I've been wondering. To get a sense of who Maud was. To possibly find a way to honor what seems to have been a very sad life. To maybe get some clues into why her son murdered her. Her son, who, I found out shortly after seeing the house, was a deeply troubled sex offender, who was charged by the FBI for child pornography and soliciting a minor in 2014. And to hopefully do it without any bad energy attaching itself to me. I do keep wondering, why, if this was a murder-suicide, did the police not do a deeper investigation? Is it because there were no kin to care? Anyone have insight? Thank you for the great support, I really do appreciate it. If you are enjoying what I'm doing, why not think about subscribing to my channel? It is free and would help me a great deal. At the time of the sleepover, it was me, and my best friend, both age 7 or 8. We are both now 16 and 17, and haven't talked about this incident since. We lived in Florida, about 15 minutes away from Tampa. It was one of our many sleepovers we had, and it was no different from others. We played with Barbies, watched movies, read books, until we couldn't take it anymore and went to bed around 9 or 10. I turned off the lights and climbed up to my top bunk where both me and my friend were going to sleep. As I laid down, something immediately didn't feel right. The house I lived in was relatively old, and our landlord sucked and never came to fix anything. Let alone, did he only care when our rent was due. Before getting in bed, I flipped on my fan, and had my mom turn the AC down. But as I got in bed, my fan was turned off, so was the AC. But I thought the power went out and didn't think much of it. About 20 minutes go by and I can't sleep, and I feel like I'm dying of heat stroke. I'm not sure if my friend is awake, so I say her name quietly. She responds immediately, saying, "I can't sleep." But it's not because it's hot. I look over, and can barely see her but her silhouette. I look up at the ceiling and sigh, and say, "What is it then?" She responds saying, "It's the man in the corner." When I say I got chills, I got chills. I look over at her slowly, and then turn my head to look at the corner. I thought she was lying, because I didn't see anything. I let out a breath of air I didn't know I was holding in. I go to adjust my blanket, and that's when I see him. A man, dark and tall, seeming to stare at both of us. I immediately grip my friend's hand, and close my eyes hard. "We have to get my mom," I whispered, and I felt my friend nod. But we both laid there, unable to move. All of a sudden, I feel the movement of someone climbing up the ladder and crawling slowly. The blankets moved with the movement, and I slowly opened my eyes, to watch the man slowly starting to crawl towards us. I was gasping for air and looked over to see my friend watching paralyzed from moving. I look back at the man, and can only see his outline, no features. I hold my friend's hand tight and say, "Scream when I tap you finger," I barely got out in a whisper. She slowly nodded, and as I watched the man slowly reach for my face, I tapped her hand and we both screamed bloody murder. My mom came running in, no later than 20 seconds, and turned on the light, and both me and my friend were holding each other crying. There was no trace of the man, and my mom checked all doors, saying they were locked and weren't even touched. We both slept on the couch that night, watching Barbie movies, and holding each other tightly. To this day, I don't know what it was, or who it was, but I will always remember the eerie feeling of death being close to my face.